Right, so we're looking at juries here then, and it's the second exam question that can be asked on juries. It is the qualifications, disqualifications, others, selection, vetting and challenging. So in the exam it would be questioned like, discuss the qualifications required to sit on a jury and how jurors are selected. Now it's a bit of a trick question really, because it just says the words qualification and selection, but if you just did the qualification and selection bit, you would be looking at probably about 5 marks out of 18. So you need to be aware that qualification and selection of jurors actually includes 6 areas. Okay, so I'm going to take you through them bit by bit. It'll be 2 separate videos. And you'll be able to have a look at what we mean. Right, so first of all then, qualification at the top of the page. So you start off by telling me the 3 basic qualifications that are needed in order to be on the jury. Now, they are made by the Juries Act and amended by the Criminal Justice Act, okay? Right, fill in then, so to qualify for a jury service, you must be, the age has actually changed, so it was 18 to 70, but in 2014 it changed to 75. So what I'd like you to add in there is 18 to 70, but then put in brackets that as of 2014 it's now changed from 18 to 75. Okay, second qualification then, you need to be on the electoral register, i.e. you need to be eligible to vote, otherwise we can't get you because we select you from the electoral register. So that's your second qualification. And your final one, you need to have lived in the UK for a minimum of 5 years since you was 13. Obviously that amounts to 18, but what we're saying is if you've moved away and then you've come back, or you're just a newer resident, you'd have to have lived here for a minimum of 5 years before we'd consider you for jury service. Okay, so 18 to 75, on the electoral register and lived in the UK for 5 years since 13. So that's the qualification bit. So you see there's not really much to write there. Right, disqualification then here. What you need to do is give me some examples of people that are disqualified permanently and disqualified for 10 years. Now ideally I'd like 2 examples of each in order to get the credit. So you've got permanently 10 years. Right, disqualified permanently then, basically anybody that's received life in prison, anyone that's been put in prison to protect us, protect the public, anybody that's received an extended sentence, because that means they're quite dangerous, so we don't really want them sitting on a jury, and anyone that's been in prison for 5 years or more. So with the harsher sentences really that we're looking at. Whereas to be disqualified for 10 years, either you've served less than 5 years in prison, you've received a suspended sentence, or you've been having a community order with attachments. Now those bottom 2 are actually quite light sentences. When we discussed sentencing, we suggested that a suspended sentence is quite easy because it lets you off really, on the premise that you don't reoffend. And a community order, you're not in prison, you're doing attachments within the community, but actually it just shows you that we do see that as quite serious, because it disqualifies you from being able to sit on a jury and discuss the sort of liberty of your peers there. So it is quite important. So 2 examples of each then, disqualified permanently or disqualified for 10 years. Why might a person on bail be disqualified? Well, obviously, if you're on bail, we haven't decided what's happening at your court date yet. So you need to be able to go to court for your court date. You might then actually get convicted, in which case you might end up permanently or for 10 years anyway. So we don't let you sit if you're on bail because you haven't sat your court date yet, and it might be that you're found guilty. Person that fails to declare this disqualified receives a fine of £5,000. Basically then, it's your job to tell us that you're disqualified. This is where the system's a bit wrong really, because what should happen is they should automatically be able to depict that you cannot sit on the jury. But instead, you get your pamphlet, you get your summons, and you get the explanation saying you can't sit if you fall into these categories. So it's your job to tell us that you are disqualified, and if you don't do that, that's when you get the fine of up to £5,000. So you've got to make sure that you explain that to us. Okay, so the top of the page is your qualifications. This is your disqualification, so that's QD. If you just turn over then, we're going to do the O, so QDO, the first part of the question. Right, so these are other people that can't sit on the jury service. So others, they're unable to serve. So this is your others. Now, you need to bear something in mind here. These people are not disqualified. They are just unable to sit for a particular reason. So you just need to be aware of that, because a lot of people think that they are disqualified and they're not. It's just for another reason that they can't sit. Right, so before 2003, certain people from certain professions were able to avoid jury service. So like doctors and surgeons, barristers, solicitors, they didn't need to sit on jury service, especially the legal profession, because it'd be a conflict of interest. But those excusals were abolished in 2003. So now, you can fill in your example there, doctors. So now, those professions do need to sit. So like your lawyers, judges, police, barristers, solicitors, really, they should serve on the jury service now, so they shouldn't be able to get any form of excusal. So what you're suggesting here is that for a particular reason, you are unable to sit on the jury service. Okay, I'm just smalling it so you can get on one screen. So there's a reason that you're unable to sit. Now, so what happens is when you get your summons through the post, it will list people that would also be unable to sit. And again, you would need to let us know. Right, you need one example from each box, okay? So you've got all 4 boxes here. You need one from each in order to get the credit, okay? Right, so first of all then, ineligible. So you're ineligible to sit on the jury service if you have a mental disorder, okay? You don't need all of these, but just fill in a couple of examples. So you've got a mental disorder. So for example, you are in a mental hospital. So that'll be one. So if you're in a mental hospital, obviously you would be unable to sit on the jury. Now that is enough to get that credit, but I'm still going to give you some other examples. So what else would they say? If you are regularly receiving treatment for a mental disorder. So you are regularly receiving treatment for a mental disorder. Or finally, if you are under guardianship. So this means that somebody else is having to help look after you because of your mental disorder. You have a guardian in that sense, so you wouldn't be able to sit on the jury. So if you fill those 3 in, you use one of them as an example. So you are ineligible with a mental disorder, i.e. you're receiving treatment for one. Right, lack of capacity then. So if you've got a lack of capacity, it just means that you wouldn't be able to cope very well with the trial. So a person may be discharged for lack of capacity to cope with the trial. Examples, so anybody that doesn't speak English very well, you would struggle obviously with the language barrier there in the courtroom, or anyone who is deaf or blind. Again, you've got to be able to see the evidence, hear the evidence, see witnesses, hear witnesses. So if you have got the disability like that and it's quite strong, it would probably affect your judgment there. So ideally, you would mention that and be excused. Right, then you've got excusals, discretionary excusal and a normal excusal. You need to know the difference with this. So a normal excusal is that you just don't do it. So you ask to be excused, they say yes, and you don't sit on that jury service at all. You could get picked in another year or so, because it is a randomised system. But for this particular occasion, you are not sitting on the jury. Okay? Right, so those with good reason can make an application to the Jury Central Summoning Bureau. So you need to speak to those and ask them if you can be excused. So examples might be you're a single parent with a young child. You might have a serious illness, so like you might have just been diagnosed with terminal cancer or something. You could be in the armed forces and they want you to be going somewhere. Okay, that's enough examples. So just somebody who would be able to get completely excused and not sit at all. Okay, and that's what we're looking at there. Right, and discretionary excusal means that you would move it to a later date. So it's not that you're not sitting it, you're just shifting it a little bit for a particular reason. Okay, now if you want to just fill in there, so examples of discretionary excusal are things like a student with exams. So if you're a student that's got exams, it's not sitting it, you're just going to move it to a later date. Okay, it could be that you've got a wedding, so you're actually getting married. Okay, or it could be that you've got an operation booked. Okay, so there's a lot of different reasons why you just push it to a later date. A pre-booked holiday is also a good example, but obviously the holiday has to be pre-booked. You can't turn around and say that you've got a holiday when actually you've got your jury service summons and then you've just suddenly decided that you wanted to not do jury service on that particular occasion. Okay. Right, so this is the O then. So we've started off with qualifications, disqualifications and others. Now these three together make the qualification aspect of the question. Okay, so what you need to be aware of is that if it says qualifications and selection, qualifications actually means those three things. Okay, so you'd need to write about those that are qualified to sit on jury service, those that are disqualified permanently and for 10 years, so that splits off into two, and then your other people that are unable to sit, ICED, spells iced. Okay, so that's your first part of the question, and I'll upload the second one under your selection, vetting and challenging. So this is just worth 9 marks.